There are plenty of chess events online that you can join around. Whichever time control you're comfortable with should be the time control that you'll be playing for fun. So you can definitely join different chess clubs that you'd like and see how things goes. Um, yeah, there's plenty of ways to stay active in the chess community. If you're into classical games, there are G40. They call it G45 on Lichess, like 45 plus 45. So that would be a 45-minute time control plus 45-second increment. There's definitely a league that you have to sign up for it. So if you're into long games, make sure to check it out. If you're busy at work or school, you can also just sign up for those 3-minute games. It should also be fine. Anyway, we're focusing on this game. There were exchanges on the d4 square. Knight, both knights are taken out. So this is a 4-knight variation in the Sicilian. There is a passive line that I can play, which is pawn to e6, defending d5 square until I get castled and my bishop gets placed on b7 as a fianchetto structure. Also, I can push this pawn on e5, and I can try to plug in my bishop on e6 and fight for the d5 square that way. Couple of choices here. I believe this is called the Chekhover variation. So in the main line, white plays bishop b5, but here the queen is just pulled back to d2, which is unusual. So in this position, looks like white is already committed on castling kingside. So in most anti-Sicilian, especially in Chekhover, king gets castled on the queen side. So the queen blocking the bishop makes me think that my opponent will most likely castle kingside. So the bishop placement would be either bishop c4 or bishop b5. Therefore, I will skip on pawn to e5 pawn push. Pawn to e6 should be fine, expecting this bishop c4 structure. Okay, one way to open up this third square bishop is with a fianchetto structure. Okay, looks like my opponent is still castling queenside after all, but I just prepared this pawn structure for bishop c4. This is fine too. I'll play it this way. My opponent's next move should be castling, and also removing this knight, starting to push these pawns on my king side. And my goal is to either push my pawns on the queen side or control the center. Okay. It's hard to really move this queen to c7 because after queen c7 there's knight b5, attacking this pawn on d6. Also moving this queen to b6 blocks my pawn push, potentially, so I wouldn't play queen b6 either. Queen a5 also blocks my pawn push, so there's not that many moves that I can potentially do other than pawn to a6, which prevents the knight b5 attack on my queen if I decide to place it on c7. I think the next move for my opponent would be knight b5. Therefore, I would be playing pawn to a6. I mean, this bishop really just stays there, and then these pawns are pushed. Other option would be bishop e2 for white. That would also be good. Okay, king b1 move. It's a good waiting move. He's definitely waiting for me to move out my queen first, or my pawns first, seeing where I want to attack. I can attack the center, but I want to place my pieces in position first. Something like queen c7 or bishop d7, or I can also push this pawn and then play rook b8. Plenty of options for me here. Definitely queen has to be moved, but it's a matter of when I should move it. Only square that I really want is queen c7. Pushing this pawn way too early just stops my own pawn push. Because after pawn to b5, there are two pieces attacking the b5 square. Therefore, I cannot push the a pawn unless I decide to push b4, and then the knight sits on a4. Therefore, I'm gonna need my bishop on d7. I think that's the plan. Queen c7, bishop d7, and then start pushing my pawns. My opponent still has the knight on the f file, therefore my opponent has to remove that knight first before pushing f4, f5. So I definitely have some time to initiate the attack instead of defending against any attack. I think in this position, black is able to initiate the attack first. Therefore, I would. Okay, pawn to g4. I mean, next move is pawn to h4, obviously. h4, h5, and then g5. That's 3 moves before my knight gets kicked out of the way. I can also just take it. Knight takes g4, rook g1, and then I have a move on knight ge5, so that my knight sits on the center, supported by the other knight. And then after takes, I have 2 pawns on the center, or I can take it with the other knight. For my previous games, I've been taking these pawn on g4. Main option here would definitely to ignore it and just start pushing my queenside pawns, but for this game, I'll take it. My decision is mostly based on the experience of my previous games, so therefore I'll take it. And then after rook g1, I can definitely play knight ge5. I like this move simply because both knights are connected. Once my knight gets taken, I can take with the other, or the simplest way is just take with a pawn. 2 pawns on the e file isn't that bad, it's controlling the entire center. And also it's easy to defend since my knight and queen are in position to defend the e5 square. Therefore, I'll take with the pawn. So taking with a knight, there's an f4 pawn push, which gives my opponent an extra tempo to push with attack. So f4, f5 could be devastating. Therefore, I will retake with a pawn. So after pawn takes e5, after pawn takes, I have an extra defense on f4. Therefore, my opponent has to defend the f file first before being able to completely push. So yeah, I'll take with a pawn. If my opponent decides to take. Well, this knight has to move regardless, since the knight is blocking the f file, blocking the queen from accessing the g file or h file. This bishop is defending g5, so there's no immediate queen g5 at all. So queen has to maneuver with something like queen f4, and then maybe queen g3. It really takes a while for this queen to move around. Also, queen f4 is a good candidate move. This is just... No, that's not a free. That's not free, so I'm not taking it. After it takes this, rook takes g7 check, and that's just losing. Let's not do that. It's kind of obvious though. So knight e2, let's go with the defense on the a4 square. I'm thinking of just pushing the a pawn without the b pawn. Push, takes. Does it really accomplish anything? So push, takes, and then I have queen a5. It doesn't really do much, so I don't think I would be doing that way. Other option would be pawn to b5, but then it doesn't look like it's accomplishing anything. It's hard to push the pawn against a fianchetto structure like this. I'm thinking of ways to attack this queen side. It's definitely my turn to attack the queen side. The center is well defended. Although there's queen f4 maneuver that I should be worrying about. So the only defense that I could possibly do against queen f4 is knight g6. But knight on the g file is usually met with pawn h4, pawn h5. So let's not do that. Knight g6 is a good idea actually, since bishop and knight would be defending the h4 square, therefore it cannot push. But the rook can come back to the h file and just push h4, and then I'll be in a pickle. So let's not push that way. Really, my options here are pushing a pawn or b pawn, but I don't know which one to push first. Pushing b pawn gives space for my bishop, but I don't even need my bishop on d7 anymore, since there's no knight a4 blockade. Bishop d7, however, gives room for my rook to be connected to each other. So I think a good waiting move here would be bishop d7. I don't have a concrete attack going on at all. Therefore, bishop d7 would be fine. However, I'm planning to defend this e6 square with my pawn, so after knight takes e5, it opens up the d file. That could be dangerous, so I can support this with rook d8 actually. Rook d8 first, takes, and then I have a rook defending the bishop. If bishop d7 first, after takes, my bishop will hang. So I need to support the bishop first, and then bishop d7. I can also play bishop e8, just so I can keep the d file open. Therefore, the rook can come over to rook dc8 later on. Okay, my opponent's definitely attacking aggressively here. Okay. I mean, the only defense that I can think of is... Wait, am I gonna make it? This looks like a quick game actually. Bishop f8. Yeah, bishop f8. Knight g5. Mate. My other option is to push the pawn on g6, and it's met with yeah, knight g5 is coming, so I have to watch out for that. My option here is pawn to g6 really. I don't see any other defense. Moving this bishop allows knight g5, which is checkmate on h7, h8. So pawn push is my only option here. Should I think further? I don't have any other moves other than this one. So keeping this bishop on e7 maintains the defense on g5. I could think further if I can see any other moves, but I don't really see anything else. So therefore I'll move right away. Condition remains the same on knight takes e5. It has to be taken with a pawn. Otherwise, if it's taken with a knight, it will be met with pawn f4. My pawn will be pushing with tempo. My next goal here is not to attack, but rather get rid of this queen on h file. Maybe a simple bishop f8 attack will remove it from h6, but then it could go back to somewhere like h4, h3. It's still annoying. It's really hard to get rid of this queen actually on the h file. The reason that I want to get rid of this is that next moves for my opponent would be pawn to h4, h5. Kind of disrupts my structure on the king side. So this queen cannot sit on h6 for so long. I have to attack it right away. I think my next move would be a simple bishop f8. And then queen h4 or queen h3 just stops the pawn push. Okay, I only have one move, which is bishop takes. So I'll do it right away. There's nothing else stopping the checkmate threat on h7, so therefore it's a bishop takes move. Queen takes g5 would be much better move since it's starts the attack on h file. Oh, however, there's knight f3 fork on these two major pieces. Therefore, my opponent will be forced to take with a rook. Rook takes g5, yeah. I have to be careful here. I don't have a bishop anymore on the dark squares, so there's not that much option to really kick out this queen on h6. Therefore, I mean, queen on h6 should not be left unattended. It's an aggressive attack by itself. Also, yeah, pawn h4 and h5 is definitely coming. So let's say I defend with queen e7, h4, and I still have time to play queen f8 to get rid of the queen. And that forces a queen trade actually, if my opponent decides to push pawn h4. The center looks defended. So queen e7, bishop takes e5, pawn takes e5. No, I have both knights connected actually, so I think queen e7 is the move. Even if my opponent tries to kick out the knight, I still have moves like knight d7 to retreat. I can also jump in with the knight f3. But no, it traps the knight. Knight d7 is the move actually, if it gets attacked. The center looks fine. Knight, bishop takes, pawn takes, rook takes. Yeah, that's fine. The center looks fine. I'm more worried about this queen being on h6. So if my opponent decides to push with pawn h4 right away, I have queen f8, forcing an exchange on the queens, and that would make the position much simpler to deal with. Yeah, looks like I'm not going to be attacking for the game. I'll just defend against my opponent's attack and hopefully take it to an endgame, then play an endgame that way. The move that I can see right now is pawn to f4, and I have knight d7 like mentioned earlier. Knight f3 is not really a good option since after getting attacked by a rook, I don't have that many options for it. So yeah, pawn to f4, knight d7. I don't see any other moves. Knight f4 maybe, knight f4, knight g3. But then this bishop is defending this f5 square as well, since it hasn't moved yet. So there's really no f4, f5, or knight g3, f4, f5. Yeah, I can't think of a good plan for white to avoid this queen trade. Yeah, f4, knight d7. Okay, let's checkmate. It's kind of embarrassing. I didn't see the checkmate trick. Okay, I'm putting this on an analysis board and see where things went wrong. Um, so if I decided to pull back the to not pull back the knight, I'll be down a piece. My opponent just launched an aggressive attack on my king side, which I didn't expect. This 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 attack is out of main line of the Chekhover Sicilian. We'll put this on the analysis board and see where things really went wrong. I don't have that many options really, other than to pull back and just accept my defeat there. I think I'm defeated at that point already. I didn't defend properly, so we'll put this on an analysis board and see how things really look like. So analysis of the PGN, and then I usually put my analysis on chess.com. Maybe chess.com. I mean, you can also use Lichess analysis. It isn't that bad, but this is just the analysis board that I'm used to play. And then I'll put it on depth 30, which takes a while to run. So I'll give it a couple of minutes and see how the analysis goes. Okay, after letting the analysis run for a couple of minutes for depth 30, the score is 96.9 versus 61.6%. My opponent really played well. I never had the advantage in the entire game, so this should be fun to study. This is just mainline Sicilian, and then after knight c6, usually with a Chekhover variation, this knight c6 is usually met with bishop c5, bishop d6, takes, and that's usually how my Chekhover variation games work. But this queen d2 move is quite unique. I just didn't know what to do with it, so this should be fun to study. Okay, pawn to e6. I was just preparing this for this bishop c4 move. Since the bishop didn't move to bishop b5, I was expecting a bishop c4. So that's why I played bishop e6, pawn to e6, which is like the best. Okay, so inside castle, and then here, I thought that my queen cannot really move since I was planning a queenside pawn push. So in offside castling, usually my initial plan is to launch a pawn push over here on this side, maybe like pawn to a6, b5. Or maybe pawn to a6, b5, and then maybe b4, something like that. I have to support something first since there's two pieces defending the b5 square. But that's usually how I go with my games on the offside castling thingy. The other move that I could have done, actually, thinking back about it, is queen a5. I think queen a5 just put an extra defense in the center, and also taking out the queen. But then my plan during the game was to launch a pawn push. That's why I didn't. So that's why I wanted to place my queen on c7. But before that happens, there's also this knight b5 move, attacking this d6 square. So my next move was pawn to a6. Oh. Okay, looks like queen a5 was the best move. So it turns out that a pawn push against a fianchetto structure and a queen side is not the best idea after all. Okay, so looks like I'll follow this line. Queen a5, and then king b1 is what my opponent played. Next move would be rook d8. I'll follow this line for about like 5 moves. Rook d8, knight d4, and then we'll just trade knights, I guess. Queen takes d4, and then pawn to a6. Pawn to a6 and then d5. Okay, so I should be fighting for the center instead of planning for a queenside pawn push against the fianchetto structure. That's good to know. I don't have much games against the fianchetto structure, Chekhover type of thing, so this is quite new to me. So after castling queenside, I just didn't know what to do actually. I wanted to stick with my old routine of pushing my pawns, but it turns out I cannot push the pawn. So yeah, queen a5 was the best move. It looks like a Zosin attack, so against Zosin attack, queen a5 is also necessary. Looks like against the Chekhover, also queen e5. Okay, let's keep going. Looks like that's the biggest mistake of the game, is not playing queen a5, rook a8, and then pawn d5, pawn push. I'm just missing the theme really for this game. King b1 is an accurate one. Okay. b5, b4. Oh, that's a mistake. Knight takes g4 is a mistake. So if I ignore it, my potential move during the game was pawn to b5. It looks also inaccurate. But the thing about pawn to d5 is that after pushing, there's this pawn push on g5, kicking out the defender for the d5 square. What happens here? Knight takes, d takes. Oh, this knight will be misplaced if that's the case. So there's no pawn to g5. So if my pawn gets pushed on d5, let's just go with this exchange. See what happens. Turns out I don't even have to retake immediately. I have rook d8. Bishop d3. I'm following the computer lines here. Can my opponent play bishop c4? Just so white can put an extra defense on the d5 square. He takes. Knight takes d5. Knight takes. Bishop takes d5. Knight b4. Attacking this bishop. And there's c4. I'm trying to look for an advantage here for either white or black, but I was just thinking that bishop c4 should have been the best move there, just defending the center. Bishop f8. And then, at this point I just wanted to trade this knight for a bishop. Why would this not be good? Oh, because there's bishop g4 in the end. There's bishop, yeah, bishop takes d4, so knight takes should be good, right? Okay, looks like the best. Takes, bishop takes. Okay, even in material, it looks like black has a lot of advantage, but it really isn't on the eval. Okay, let's go back with a line that so one thing that I learned in Chekhover variation against queenside fianchetto is just I shouldn't be aiming for a pawn push on the queenside, but rather queen a5 and fight for the center. Queen a5, rook d8, and I think, yeah, even after pawn to g4, I just ignore it and just push the pawn to d5. I'm just missing the theme here. Oh, that's a big move that I missed. Bishop f6. Because if I play bishop f6 there, I mean, this bishop is still attacked, but then I have queen e7 to defend it. I don't see knight g6 being that advantage, since doesn't give that much of an hand. Pawn take. This is definitely pawn take here. Okay, but since I'm best move is knight g6, but after bishop takes, pawn takes, I don't even have to retake that way. So after knight here, queen I'm assuming queen has to stay here on h5. What happens after queen h5? It's not like I can attack queen h5. How is this bad? Bishop takes b2. Oh, it's good for black because I get to trade the dark square bishop. Because even if white pulls back with queen e3, I can just trade it like this. And I'm getting rid of a strong bishop on the queen side. And then where's the attack? Turns out I don't have any attacks at all for the Chekhover. I have to maintain my defense on the queen side. So queen defend here is queen e7 and then f5. Looks like a scary position. Would I have done it that way? Go back to the game. Definitely bishop f6 is needed there. Okay, bishop s. I'll follow the line and then we'll keep going. So bishop f6, knight takes, pawn takes d5, knight g3, and then I convert to a kingside fianchetto. Pawn to g6. Actually, the computer says bishop h8, but I don't believe it. Let's follow this. Bishop takes, knight g6, pawn to g7, knight h5. Oh, I'm playing bishop h8 since there's a knight over here. Okay, now that makes sense. I didn't see the knight h5. But if the knight wasn't there, I'll play bishop g7. I don't mind. Okay, we'll keep going. Since we found the mistakes of the game. And then that's the blunder later on. If I ignore... I mean, I'm already lost at this point, so even playing best move like this wouldn't really save me. D takes, rook takes, queen takes. It's just a huge advantage for white already, position-wise. So it's not even worth playing that anymore at this point. And then there's a lot of attacks going on my king side. This is totally resignable. Even if I didn't hang the checkmate in the end, it's already lost at that point. So go back all the way. A couple of things to take out of this game is that I guess the Chekhover variation, queen a5, rook d8, and then fight for the d5 square. Queenside pawn push doesn't really work since there's a knight and bishop defending b5. Also, even if the pawn makes it all the way to a4 after takes, it's still a solid defense for white since there's a queen defending a2. So black should really be focusing on pushing d5. And even with distractions like pawn to g4, d5 should still be pushed after takes. Rook here should be fine. We looked at the line earlier with bishop c4, which would be good for black, since after pawn takes, there will be bishop g4 hanging. There's a pawn on g4 hanging, which could be taken by bishop. So even with distraction on g4, black should be fighting for the d5 square against the Chekhover. Best move here would be pawn to d3. Bishop to d3, I mean. Then after pawn takes, I mean, white can still resume the pawn attack here. But then, this is already manageable for black. As soon as the d5 pawn is there, I should be able to defend this properly. And it will be in a different game. So, last thing that I did during my analysis is use these moments, key moments thing. And try to see if I remember the main mistakes that I did during the game. So here, pawn to d5 should be best. And that's just game over for me. After not fighting for the d5 square, it's just game over. I mean, even here, I'm already lost. It looks like losing for black already. Yeah. Here, computer says b5, but after pawn takes, rook takes, queen takes, it's losing already. So yeah, lesson for Chekhover, definitely fight for the d5 square and not push on the queen side. If you have watched the entire video, I appreciate it. I can't bring home a win for today, but thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch y'all later. Peace out.